Nurture and support. Nurture and support. This is a podcast theme song. And it's really short.
Nurture and support begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Nurture and Support. I am Mel at Karmic9.
Hi everybody, I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
And we're back for episode 133 of Nerd and Stuff, a recommendation podcast that we hope we give you a few things you haven't heard of before to go enjoy.
I didn't do any research. I couldn't find any state laws or anything for 133. I'm sure there is something, but I did not get the opportunity to get an official sponsor for today's show. So it's
Okay.
Brought to you by Mel and Kelly this time, I think.
Okay, yeah, so Kelly's not going to expand my constitutional horizons today.
Not today.
Okay, I'll count on you next time, though. Okay, so I'm really kind of stupidly excited to give y'all this recommendation this week. I think Kelly's going to like it unless he's already seen this on YouTube. And actually, some of you may have already seen this because, once again, I'm behind the curve. This is not a new YouTube show. It's been around for, I think, since 2014, maybe the end of 2013. So I'm, again, a little slow on the uptake. However, I stumbled across this YouTube channel through one of my previous recommendations that I know Kelly watches, and that is the Punished Props YouTube channel. I really enjoy their YouTube channel. And they kind of led me to the All, AWE, so All Me YouTube channel. One of the, now the All Me channel is not necessarily my recommendation. It's a show that's on the All Me YouTube channel, but they have several different shows that they run. And this is just one of them, and it's called Man at Arms. And there's also kind of a second section called Man at Arms Reforged. Like I said, this show's been going on for quite a while. So it ran for, I want to say, about 40 episodes under Man at Arms. And then they kind of reconfigured and got some different people in. And so they kind of redubbed it Man at Arms Reforged. So what the show is about is actually forging real life-sized metal weapons.
Nice.
And we know Kelly likes forges. So it's really, really, really cool. I am totally fascinated by it. And I was telling someone at work the other day that one of the things I love the most about this show is that it's kind of crafty and that you're watching people fabricate something, but it is so completely outside of my ability and price range to be able to buy the equipment that there's no possible way that I could possibly get sucked into this craft. So these are professional artisans. These are blacksmiths, swordsmiths, armorers. So the first part of it, called Man at Arms, was filmed at a place called Sword in the Stone. And the owner of that is Tony Swatton. They're out in California. They make real weapons to be used in movies. And I'm sure they do other things on top of that, but they actually make the iconic weapons in a bunch of movies to be used in, the close-ups and to be used in the film for the filming. And that's totally cool. I think the first video that they did, and what I'll do is in the blog post, they have a playlist with every episode, and I will link that playlist in our blog post, so you can just go to our blog post, and it'll all be listed right there, and you don't have to go search for it. But the very first episode they did was making Jaime Lannister's sword from Game of Thrones. And, it's got the double-headed Lannister lions on the pommel, and it's a nice-looking sword. It's not terribly arcane-looking. It's a nice, normal-looking type of sword. And it was really pretty cool. They have done a lot of Game of Thrones, obviously, as Game of Thrones is horribly popular. But they've done Needle, Arya's sword, and they've done Jon Snow's sword as well. And they may have done some other things. I have not watched all of the videos. I'm still working my way through.
Iron Claw, I believe, is Snow's sword.
Okay, yeah. On top of on top of having done that, the Jaime Lannister Game of Thrones swords, something you might be interested in, Kelly, they did William Wallace's sword in Braveheart, and Kelly's working on a mashup Braveheart cosplay. So
That could be
cool.
good. That could be
Yeah,
good.
it's pretty cool. And one of the neat things that I particularly liked about the Tony Swatton's section of Man at Arms is they talked about a lot of the traditional ways that these weapons were made. Now, they're using, they do have an anvil and they do hammer things and they do have to heat the metal up really hot. But they're using power hammers to do all of that really heavy hammering. I mean, we're talking some machinery that could seriously injure you. And it's just really cool. I don't know. I can't explain just what is so incredibly fascinating to me by it, but it's really cool. And he goes through and explains, what would have been done in that time of making those. And he says, particularly in the Braveheart episode, that he really enjoys making the realistic, true to the past. I'm sorry, y'all, if you're hearing cats destroying things, my cats are loose and they're straight from evil. So sorry, but Tony Swatton says that's really what he enjoys the most, is to make historically accurate weapons. He really enjoys that. So he really enjoyed making Braveheart's sword. Great, and it's a great sword. So it's a huge, I think he said the blade was like 4 feet long. It's amazing. So the episodes are actually really short. They're only about 10 minutes. So, and a lot of the early ones were running about a little bit over 7 minutes. So there's not a huge time investment to get on there and watch a few episodes. It's really pretty cool. And I have to say, still, I've watched episodes from both sections, Man at Arms and Man at Arms Reforged. I still have to say my favorite weapon that I've seen so far is Tony having done the Lich King's sword from World of Warcraft, doing Frostmourne, the Lich King sword. And that is a very ornate, arcane skulls and ramps heads. And it is a seriously cool sword. And I think it was the last one that they actually did on the show. And he says they'd had people begging for them to make it, but it was so involved that he really was kind of afraid to get them into it, but it turned out super cool. I really recommend y'all watch that if you like fantasy weapons, and they don't really get much more cooler than the Lich King sword. So the guys that do the Man at Arms Reforged are the guys at Baltimore Knife and Sword. It's two brothers, Carrie and Matt Stagmer, and they both of these places have numerous people, like 5 or 6, to do all of this work. So they each have a different style. So when you watch the episodes, you can kind of see where they differ. The guys at Baltimore Knife and Sword are doing a lot more of the game weapons. They've done a lot of weapons from League of Legends. So if you're a League of Legends player, you'll really enjoy a lot of the weapons that they've made from there. They've done one of the recent ones, they did a axe from God of War, from the new God of War that's coming out. And they've done a couple from For Honor, which is a new game I haven't played, coming out. And one of my favorites, they've done swords, helmets, armor from Skyrim. And I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan. And while I'm not horribly fond of all the Nord stuff in Skyrim, because I'm a Morrowind type girl, so Skyrim's landscape was not my favorite. However, the gameplay in Skyrim is really uber cool. So I still play the special edition of Skyrim to this day, and it's been out for years. So Skyrim's always awesome, and there's a whole ton of armor in Skyrim that they can copy. So they are doing it justice. And one of the things that they've done in both parts of Man at Arms and Man at Arms Reforged is after they make something, the last little montage at the end is like everybody involved using the sword to cut things. They're going full on Braveheart, trying to smash soda cans, watermelons, ceramic skulls, all sorts of things. So if you like to see people wantonly destroy things, the last few seconds of the show is always, that's what it always is on both ones. The Skyrim helmet, by the way, bent the sword that they hit it with.
Oh.
So it would have protected someone's head really, really well. So that's what I have for you, is on the All Me channel on YouTube. There is a show called Man at Arms and Man at Arms Reforged. They have them all in the same playlist. I'll link it on our blog post. But it's really fascinating. It's very interesting. And I learned, now y'all, I have read Dungeons and Dragons sword type books my whole life, and I never knew what the name of that groove that swords have. When you think about it, all swords have this groove going along the blade. It's not just decorative, y'all. It has a purpose. Did you know it has a purpose, Kelly?
Well, I knew, I don't know for sure. I had heard a variant of that regarding bayonets that also carry on the blade indentation down the middle, and that had always been in my bayonet reading referred to as a channel, more to let the blood flow out was what
Yes.
I heard.
Well, that's exactly what it is. They had a technical name for it in the weaponsmithing world, which was neat. They throw a bunch of that stuff out too, but it didn't sink in. I don't remember the name. But I did remember is the layman's term is a blood groove, and that its purpose is to, when you stab somebody with the sword, to let the blood flow through so that the sword, through the power of suction, doesn't get stuck in the body and you can pull it out. And I was like, cool. That's so cool. Now I know there's a name. It's not just a decoration. It's got a purpose, man. Ancient people were smart to figure this stuff out. It's amazing. So.
The guy coming home from work, my sword keeps getting stuck in people all the time.
Yes.
I gotta fix this somehow.
And they figured out, hey, if they used a blade that had like a notch out of it or something, that sword magically came out of the bad guys that they stabbed with it. Why? People back then were smart.
You totally see the first time they did that. The guy puts it in, pulls it out, goes, well, that was easy, does it again, does it again.
It's like a Monty Python skit. Yeah.
Look at this, doesn't stick. That'd be great. So earlier on you mentioned, I believe it was from Skyrim, kind of one of the more ornate swords, but the top sword for me of all time, I believe I've mentioned this before on the show, of course, is Talon's sword from Sword and the Sorcerer, which is the three-bladed sword. Two of the blades are jets and can shoot out. Yes. It did not look like it was made of iron. It looked like it was made out of plastic and cut painted silver. But it was such I doubt it was not a masterpiece of creation. But I doubt they did Talon's sword in any of these.
I did not, in my perusing of the list, I did not see that. But they decide what they're going to do by people begging them to do it. So subscribe and start hounding them to do that sword, because I bet you these guys would probably do that. So
yeah, and if memory serves, Talon swords, plural, because the sword had three blades, I think they were all absent blood grooves. I think they were, but he shot them into pillars and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, they were more like, sword arrows than swords. Different. Oh, that movie was so bad.
I love that movie.
Oh,
it's so good. I got to watch that again. All right. Well, this is really weird on a lot of fronts because related to the Braveheart mashup, I was just doing some research on that last night regarding the face paint and all of those things. And so I was starting to look at the sword too, to figure out if I'm going to utilize that, but kind of modify it to kind of go with what I'm going to try and do. And so here you go, bringing up Braveheart. That's I was looking at that. And then you mentioned Game of Thrones repeatedly, and my recommendation for this week is actually George R.R. Martin's book, The World of Ice and Fire, The Untold History of Westeros and the Game of Thrones,
Okay.
which is a prequel book to, well, I don't know if I guess it's a history book for Game of Thrones. So, but the book is by George R.R. Martin, of course, and he's got some co-authors, Elio Garcia and Linda Antonsen, who do it with him. But it is covering the history prior to the first Game of Thrones book. You hear, there's a lot of history of Westeros and Essos and so it basically covers tons of it. It goes back, starting with the ancient history and the first men and the children of the forest, which of all of the Game of Thrones stuff has always been, I've been like, I mean, they seem to be fairly, particularly the children of the forest, appear to be fairly important to the ongoing narrative, but it's never been to me the most exciting part, but it gave you a lot of depth around and then you learn about the Andals, and it's kind of give always this long list of this are the first men and the Andals and all that. And so Mel warned me before the show started that there was going to be a chance that there would be a cat on her head before the end of the show, and I thought she was joking.
No.
But there's officially a cat on Mel's head. Well, not on her head. It's on her shoulder, trying to eat her head right now.
This is Gizmo, and Gizmo has a thing for yarn and string and my hair. As in, we like to eat these things. And so this is, what we're doing.
Awesome. But you get the history of the Andals and all that. Valyria, which where ultimately like the Targaryens came from and all of that, that was destroyed in the Doom. You get a lot of that backstory. And it's a good read. And since we're all, those of us who are reading the books, kept up on the books, and are patiently awaiting the next book, this became another nice way to give me a bit of a fix before that, and really adding a lot of depth to some of the things, because it goes through, and I knew who the first Targaryen king was, the Aegon the Conqueror, and I knew who the last Targaryen king was, the Mad King. And I knew there were a whole bunch in between, but didn't know much. This, in the early section of the book, they go through about 11 Targaryen kings and their reigns and the different lengths of time. And it gets a little confusing because the Targaryens are not opposed to kind of interfamily wedding. And so there's a lot of, well, he married his sister or his brother's sister. And it gets a little confusing, and their names are often quite similar, but you get a ton of all the Targaryens. You then get a chance, and it goes through all the 7 kingdoms. So you get a section on the north, the Wall, the Riverlands, the Vale, the Iron Islands, the Westerlands, the Reach, the Stormlands, Dorne. So you get all of that in there, and just some depth on the history. And you'd always heard little smatterings of it, but this just adds some really good depth to it. And it also gets into the free cities as well. So you get over to Braavos and all of that, and well, as you start to understand how it all comes together. But it is, in true Game of Thrones fashion, if you like the books, The Song of Ice and Fire, it's very much like reading new chapters out of that. They don't do point of view characters like they do in the books. It is kind of written, the premise is you open this tome of there's a maester who works in the Citadel who's found all these scrolls and decided to compile a complete history of it. Very well illustrated. Get some beautiful illustrations. Not as many maps as I would have liked, because that's what I always kind of struggle with, is understanding some of the relationships. You get a little bit of that, but the illustrations they provided and things make a lot of sense and are really cool. And they've got kind of captions associated with each to give you a little more depth on a particular drawing. It's beautifully done. It's a great book. But if you're kind of patiently waiting for the next George R.R. Martin book to come out, this is a nice thing to tide you over. And I had known of it and had heard of a few people speak, this is probably a good thing, but I had never gotten around to reading it. But I did finally, and I was like, it complements the books very, very nicely, and it doesn't feel like a bolt-on to say, I just wanted to kind of crank out another book to go, and it really goes into depth. And it's my understanding that the other 2 individuals involved actually run Westeros.org, which is kind of considered maybe people who know Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire better than George R.R. Martin. They're very fanatical about it. So we're not really necessarily fan fiction, but brought in some people who are really passionate about this world, have kept track of a lot of things, and he's fleshed it out and kept it all incredibly consistent with, oh yeah, I remember reading this in that book or that book, but you get kind of the whole backstory. The thing I was really surprised on is how much I enjoyed the section on the Targaryen kings, because it was it's really well done, and it's kind of interesting to kind of see what went on, and there was a civil war between the Targaryens. I didn't know about that, and so you get to kind of hear all the different goodies from there. So it's a fun one. If you like any of the books, Song of Ice and Fire, you're gonna like this. It's gonna add depth to what you know about it. It's an attractive book to read, and I'd recommend getting The World of Ice and Fire, The Untold History of Westeros, and The Game of Thrones.
Okay, so in the question that has to be asked with every George R.R. Martin book is, on the scale of encyclopedia sized or one of those desktop dictionaries, where is this falling into the tome size here?
Surprisingly on the short end. So it is what is it? It is longer than it is wide, which gets kind of tough because some of his books start to get a little cubey. But it's around, so the version I have is 300 pages.
Okay, that's totally doable. Yeah.
And but it's the version I got was one of the kind of a little more of the oversized, kind of fake leather bound books. So I'm assuming if it translated into some of the paperback, you're still going to see, you're probably talking 300 to 400 pages there. So it's not like several of his more recent works.
And they've had to split it into 3 books.
Yeah. No, this is pretty achievable, and it's broken up kind of nicely in the, you actually, I was actually surprised I moved through the early days really, really quick. And then the Targaryen kings, because there's so many of them they cover, that takes a while to work your way through. But then each section you get a good chunk. But it's a manageable chunk.
Cool. Yeah, I know we've talked about this before. Kelly started Game of Thrones years and years after I did, and is current, whereas I had, 10-year wait after the 3rd book, and I kind of, by the time the next one came out, I was like, I think I can just wait and still catch up before the end. And so I still haven't progressed, but I have actually been considering, I've actually thought I need to get back into this, because I'm not really watching the show. I've watched the first season, and I don't have anything against the show. I love the show. I love the people in the show. I have trouble watching TV anymore. So, and then I'm so far behind. I always feel like I have to go and I have to watch everything else before I can watch the new season. And then that's like hours and hours and hours of TV, and I get depressed, and maybe I should just read the books. So anyway, it sounds like I could use this to kind of get back into that world and get into that mind space, because you have to be in the right frame to read Game of Thrones books. You can't just, jump in unprepared. So. No,
I think that's an excellent point, because I do think, one, it's because it's more manageable in size. You're not like, okay, I've got a 900-page commitment here. It's significantly less than that, and obviously no spoilers, because it's all level setting stuff, and all the big pieces you've already been exposed to in terms of the families and the back history and all of that. So it's just adding depth to that. That's actually a great idea. That'd probably be a good way to make a determination if you're ready to go into the next book, and you need to be ready to go in, because I think you are Feast for Crows was the last one you did.
Yeah. And so, I know, I'm ready. If I can get caught up, then hey, I'll be ready to go right there for the end, unless they say it's going to be 3 more books. But yeah, so this sounds like, because it's just, there's so many characters and there's so much going on, and that, when I start, every time I think about doing it, I end up not. because I've probably forgotten more about Game of Thrones by this point than I would remember by getting into and reading the book. And it's like I'm not going to go back and read the first 3 again. So, this sounds like it would be a good place, to remind me of what I loved about that world. Though I was getting really tired of nothing happening on the other side of the damn wall. Which is one of the reasons why when they split them and I found out my favorite characters weren't going to be in the next book, I was like, screw this crap. I'm not going to find out about Arya. Screw you. So that's what made me fall out of the series, and I got sidetracked, and I've always meant to go back, and I haven't. So I think I will look this up. I'm sure it's an ebook format too, though it sounds like the illustrations and the maps would be good to have in print. So I'll have to look. See what I can come up with. But it sounds like a good, in-betweener section for me to get worked back into the world of Westeros.
I think so. I think it would get you fired up. And I really, I've enjoyed the books, and this was very much that same kind of feel to it. Different because again the structure is different and its purpose is different than the books in terms of advancing an overall narrative. But you get very much immersed back. It's world building. You get very much immersed back into it, and you get to kind of learn a little bit more of the history. And just, I don't know, and I'm a geek on some of this stuff, but if you're a reader of Game of Thrones or watched the show, you knew of Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives. He had 2 wives, and so and it's a 3-headed dragon. They had 3 dragons and all that. Yeah. But you actually kind of get that all fleshed out for you a little bit more about which sister do you like better and what were their natures and all this kind of thing. So
yeah, and incest is not cool, people. This is how you end up with crazy people.
That's
a thing there.
That is borne out.
Yes.
You get some illustrations there. So it's good. So I'd recommend getting that. Cool. Mel and I visited briefly before the show started, and I think I'm the only one with a social media recommendation for this week. Is that correct?
Yes, sirree, Bob.
Well, and it is a fine one. I think that you will wholeheartedly support, and we could even say it's a recommendation from both of us, because I cannot see how you will not support encouraging people to follow this Twitter account. And it is his Twitter handle is @ToadHatGuy. That's ToadHatGuy. It's Chris Newsome is the gentleman's name, but it's @ToadHatGuy. And apparently Chris, who lives in Alabama, has a toad that frequents his front porch, likes to go and hang out. And Chris is a bit of a crafter. Okay. And so he's decided to make little hats for the toad, and out of the little foam, the crafting foam and all those types of things. And he puts the hat on the toad and takes a picture and puts it on. There's not a lot right now, but he's got a few. And so it's got the crafting angle there for you, Mel, and it kind of makes little hats. So there's one where the toad's got like a little backwards facing baseball cap, purple hat with a T on it for Toad, I assume. Kind of a pimp daddy cap as well. And then a fine 10-gallon hat as well. And the toad doesn't seem to mind the hats at all. And they're cool pictures, and I think there's more to come. It's odd because there's a regional radio show up in my neck of the woods called Bob and Tom. I think they're nationally syndicated, but I think they're kind of bigger in the Midwest. This was brought up when I was driving into work one day. They brought it up on their show. So I figured Bob and Tom mentioned the Bob and Tom show, mentioning this, the very nature of what this thing's about. This thing had to explode. But Toad Hat Guy's only got 80 followers, so you can get in early.
Wow.
For that. He's only following 2 back. That might be one of the issues. I don't know. But so you can be one of those early adopters because I think this is going to be a big, big thing. I think we're going to have a lot of many interesting things to see from Toad Hat Guy moving forward. But it's fun. I recommend y'all follow him.
That's cool. Hopefully he has a pond so he can keep different generations of toads going. So they'll keep coming back.
Yeah, that would seem to be important.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a pond by my house, but I get covered in toads all the time. So they travel pretty good distances. So anyway, but that's totally awesome because I love frogs and toads and herps and things like that, and hats and crafting.
crafting. It's like I was like, this is a nurture and support recommendation here because it's got it all.
He needs to make him a little scarf and the little cane, and he can dance like that frog from the cartoon.
And I heard that name of that frog the other day. It's a really strange name.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it is.
I never know his name, but he's awesome.
He's awesome. Yeah, and there's not a lot here to give me scale, but based on what I can see and making some assumptions, this is not a small toad. this is a toad of some substance. So
kind of hypnotoad sized.
Yes.
Cool.
Not a little guy.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. I'm gonna go check it out. Totally cool. So I don't have a social media recommendation, as we mentioned. So are you gonna be nice to Matt this week, Kelly?
I just talked about Toad Hat Guy. It seems like I'd have some material to work with. But I think it's a week to be nice to Matt. So we're going to turn it over to our good friend Matt, who's going to give you all the information how you can connect to Nurture and Support. Oh, by the way, thanks to our good friend Mike Belinsky for commenting on our last episode. One of the things we mentioned, Mike and I do Squat Cobbler, and we call our pretend group of fans the Squatties, and wanted to have Mel and I come up with something to call our pretend group of fans. And he's recommending the sup orders. So it's like supporters, but with one P. The sup orders. It's kind of cool. So thanks for that. And he also, and we'd love to hear from more of you. We had said, hey, for the Disney album, give us a good combination of who you'd like to see cover an iconic Disney song. And Mike went all in. He had Vanilla Ice, and he created a super group, Vanilla Ice and the Insane Clown Posse, doing This Is Halloween, which he wanted retitled Born on Halloween. Pretty strong recommendation. I like that.
Yes, very, very tactile.
Yes. But Matt will give you all the information on where you can go. Give us those comments, tweet us, review us, whatever you like to do, and give us your suggestions for your Disney songs and what you'd like to be called as a group and all that good stuff. And he'll give you all that information, and we'll see you all next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
You can contact us on our website, nurtureandsupport.net, or email us at nurtandsupp@gmail.com. That's NURTANDSUPP@gmail.com. Or tweet us at nurtandsupp on Twitter.
Nurturing and supporting. Donate.